Hello, everyone, and welcome back. And welcome to all who are joining us for the first time today from across the country. If you all were just dancing, I was just dancing too. So hopefully all of us in our spaces are just feeling the music, feeling connected and together. In 2011, when President Obama called on the nation to infuse our classrooms with 100,000 excellent STEM teachers in 10 years, no one thought it had a shot. Yet 100K10 emerged from that call, and together, over 10 years, we prepared more than 108,000 excellent STEM teachers against the backdrop of the most significant decline in teacher preparation programs in the history of the United States. Just earlier today, actually, President Obama tweeted a thank you to all of us and to the entire 100K10 network. It is pinned at the top of our Twitter. But I want to share it with you all because it's our collective celebration and moment. He said, in 2011, my administration made a pledge to prepare 100,000 new STEM teachers over the next 10 years. I couldn't be prouder to hear that 100K10 not only met that goal, but trained an additional 8,000 teachers who will make a difference for our kids. That is all of us. Yes, to all of us. How do we do that? In these 10 years, nearly 3,000 people, including all of you, from symphonies to botanic gardens, universities to museums, school districts, CMOs, nonprofits, foundations, and government at every level, we contributed to making that moonshot a reality. We have so much to celebrate. Yet we also know that the STEM teacher shortage persists. Even before the pandemic's great resignation, there was a persistent shortage of STEM teachers nationwide, particularly in schools serving Black, Latinx, Native American, and low-income communities. As all of you working in schools know, the role of STEM teachers and our students' need for them has only intensified. The picture is stark, particularly when viewed through the lens of race. Only 38% of high schools that serve predominantly Black or Latinx students offer calculus. Only 25% of high poverty high schools offer computer science. And while Black and Latinx undergraduates declare STEM majors at the same rate as their white peers, they switch out of those STEM majors significantly more often. All of us working toward the 100K10 goal have known for a long time that our work would not end when we reached it. The STEM teacher shortage and the way it affects Native American, Black, and Latinx students in particular is a challenge generations in the making, and it will take more than 1 decade to fix. Our original 10-year goal came from the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, a government acronym, PCAST. Since then, we've learned some things about how change happens and whose voices we must heed. So as we began to look ahead to our next 10 years, we decided to turn the idea of a presidential commission on its head and take our direction from those most excluded from STEM learning and the STEM workforce, in particular, Latinx, Native American, and Black young people. Of the world's biggest challenges, from climate change and social inequality to global pandemics. Those of you who have engaged with our storytellers have heard from them directly. Not only will they want to, they are motivated and mobilized to solve these biggest challenges. The work to prepare them to participate in our increasingly STEM-based economy, that is our work, and it cannot wait. Thus, the unCommission was born. By design, the unCommission centers young people most excluded from STEM opportunity. Through it, we are lifting up their stories, and based on those stories, we are developing a new goal that will guide our network and deliver a new vision for our future. Like with everything 100K10, we knew that we could not do this work on our own. The unCommission created a massive, diverse, and participatory experience. More than 130 organizations stepped up as bridgers and anchors, each of them agreeing to connect us to storytellers and create environments in which they could share their authentic experiences. 25 community outreach leads not only shared their own stories, but went a step further to connect their peers, friends, and family to the unCommission. We asked our community outreach leads why they participated in the unCommission, and what they told us beautifully illuminates why this experience called to so many. They talked about the power of widespread storytelling and its potential to disrupt traditional ways of thinking and lift up communities that are too often marginalized. They talked about the variation in how STEM is experienced and how hearing from different perspectives can reveal unexpected insights. They also told us about the pervasiveness of racism in STEM and how it has stifled opportunities for communities of color. And they told us they participated in the unCommission because it created a unique platform for young people, and especially young people of color, to be deeply heard. This stunning piece of art, one of many created as part of the unCommission, captures what we heard from these community outreach leads. And of course, the very heart of the unCommission is the storytellers themselves. 550 strong, with more coming in daily, many of whom are with us today. Thank you for sharing your STEM experience so boldly and honestly. You told us about your passion, excitement, and love for STEM, your anxiety, frustration, and disappointment in STEM, and your hopes for what could be different. Joining these 550 storytellers were hundreds of you who also participated in the unCommission in many different roles, including as listeners and champions, who listened directly to our storytellers and honored their demands for change. You listeners included everyone from NASA astronauts to NFL players to secretaries of education to teachers and other leaders who went face to face with our storytellers to witness what they have shared. We also worked with artists who captured the essence of what we heard from our storytellers and shared it back with them, crossing lines of difference as only art can. And ethnographers who identified patterns across the stories and lifted up the critical insights. With those insights in hand, a group of advisors whose expertise lives at the intersection of racial equity and STEM education guided us toward the most impactful levers for change. And finally, there's all of us here today. We identify some of us as many of these things: 100K10 partners, teachers, allies, funders, storytellers, and more. Today represents a pivotal opportunity for us to grapple together with what has emerged through the unCommission, to honor the raw, powerful outpouring of stories that ennobled it, and to find our network's next right thing. So what did we hear from our storytellers? I'm going to give all of us a minute to read some quotes from them. Our storytellers shared stories of enjoyment, exuberance, and pride in STEM. They also shared stories where they felt confusion, stress, and sadness. Storytellers told us about the importance of supportive teacher relationships and their teachers' passion for the subject. They shared about their classrooms, including excitement about interactive instruction and how thrilling, but also scary and frustrating collaborative projects can be. Some storytellers spoke of their early childhood exposure, sparking a light in STEM for them, and others spoke about what motivated them to enter a STEM career. And storytellers bravely told us about racism, sexism, and the impact of cultural differences between the way STEM was taught and the experiences of their parents. Across all of these insights, we heard one theme loud and clear: the importance of belonging in STEM classrooms, of walking into a STEM space, as one of our storytellers said, and feeling welcomed. Storytellers had more positive and successful STEM learning, were more engaged in their classrooms, and had greater interest in STEM when they felt a sense of belonging. And storytellers shared many, many experiences when they did not feel that sense of belonging in their STEM classrooms. Our storytellers, 80+% people of color, helped us to see something that remains largely absent from our national priorities. Our feeling that we have a place in our math or science, tech or engineering classrooms is a prerequisite to our success in STEM. It is not on its own enough, but it is essential. Yet so many of us have sat in a STEM classroom where someone has told us, implicitly or explicitly, that we didn't belong. So many of us, while dividing fractions or multiplying 3-digit numbers in algebra or calculus or physics, if we made it there, have felt lost, unworthy, not smart. And what we heard from our brave uncommissioners is that that exclusion is even more acute for our Black, Latinx, and Native American young learners. One of our storytellers, Bradley from Pittsburgh, tells us so much. I'd like to invite you all to witness what he's shared. Bradley's story is long, but I assure you it is well worth reading every word. Please take a few minutes now to read silently. And when you're done, put one word or phrase that stuck with you from his story into the chat. I've read Bradley's story many times now, and I still cannot read it without feeling moved to tears and to action. Tanya, you say, I remember being asked if I was in the right room at the start of every semester. That he wrote that. I felt it. Isolation. A unique opportunity to treat Black students with respect in these STEM subjects. Validate. Socio-emotional. Isolation. Empower. Grit. Against the odds, Bradley triumphed in a rigged system. But at what cost? I also want to say that as we witness Bradley together, as we are in the experience of being in face-to-face connection with our storytellers, with their experiences, that it changes us. Part of what we designed with the unCommission is that it would change us. So thank you for being in this space with us, with me. We have the responsibility to set students up for success in STEM. And what we heard from Bradley and so many of our storytellers is that fostering a sense of belonging in STEM classrooms is the necessary foundation for their STEM success. We know that our young people are capable. We know that they want to learn and to contribute to solving our most pressing challenges. We also know that underneath all of that, what must come first and will enable everything else is a sense that they belong, that we all belong. It is the necessary ingredient that makes everything else possible. So, what does this mean for our network as we press forward in our work to end the STEM teacher shortage? The young people of the unCommission, you have given us a clear call to action. You have shown us that you need teachers who create STEM classrooms of belonging for all students, especially Black, Latinx, and Native American students, and others too often excluded from STEM. And so, we are proposing over the next decade to prepare and retain an audacious number of new and excellent STEM teachers, to support more existing STEM teachers to stay and to succeed, so that we make a meaningful dent in the STEM teacher shortage nationwide. And we are proposing that we ensure that those teachers are resourced and supported to foster a sense of belonging, especially for Native American, Latinx, and Black learners. We do that so that students of all races and backgrounds can create the STEM solutions that our planet and our country so desperately need. This will take all of us, those who have been on this journey from the first moments of 2011 to those joining today for the first time, and more of us yet. But we know we can do it because we have done great things together already, and because our storytellers have not just shown us the way, but are joining us in making the road. Now is our time and opportunity to invite your thoughts and feedback on how we might work together to realize this vision that our young people have painted for us. Your ideas will help to refine the vision and move us closer to defining our next moonshot. Most importantly, your insights will help us to honor what storytellers have shared by moving us toward action. We cannot wait to co-create this vision with you today and for the next 10 years. Before we move into our small group discussions, I have the honor of inviting my colleague, Teresa Mooney, who has led our unCommission work, onto the stage to facilitate a conversation with some of our incredible unCommission participants. I'm going to join you all in the audience and look forward to listening to this incredible conversation and engaging with everyone in the chat. Teresa, unCommission participants, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Talia. I am so honored to be able to be a part of this conversation with our unCommission participants. I'd love to welcome and invite Caitlin, Denise, Priya, Melissa, and Tamar to the stage. Hey, everybody. Caitlin Varela is a chemistry PhD candidate at the University of Texas, San Antonio, where she researches artemisinin, a chemical involved in the production of anti-malarial drugs. She is also a Ford Foundation predoctoral fellow, an unCommissioned community outreach lead, and an unCommissioned storyteller. Denise Satimba is a qualitative researcher who uses her work to better understand how one's education quality impacts their overall life outcomes. Denise supported 100Kin10's unCommission as a storyteller, a community outreach lead, and as a synthesis support team member. Priya Mohabir serves as the Senior Vice President of Youth Development and Museum Culture at the New York Hall of Science, where she leads program development to cultivate the interests and careers of young scientists. Under Priya's leadership, NYSCI joined the UnCommission as an anchor organization. Melissa Moritz is the inaugural After School and Summer Learning Fellow, serving in the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Educational Sciences. Melissa has long been an advisor of 100Kin10's work and signed on as a bridger and listener and champion for the UnCommission. Tamar Avanieri teaches mathematics at the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, where she has taught a variety of courses, including modeling with differential equations, game theory, theoretical mathematics, and multivariable calculus. She joined 100Kin10's Teacher Forum in 2019 and is serving as an anchor and a listener and champion for the UnCommission. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Caitlin, I would love to start the conversation with you. You shared your own story and helped to gather stories from over 100 of your peers. Can you tell us a little bit about what you shared as part of the UnCommission?
Sure. I've always been a big advocate for STEM education and spreading my love for science with kids and teens. Yasmin introduced me to the UnCommission, and I immediately felt a connection with its passion and purpose. Sharing my story, I was hopeful I could give examples of two great high school teachers I had who fostered an inclusive environment and inspired my love for science. I don't think I'd be where I am today if it weren't for them. So I hope that my story and all the stories that were shared can enlighten and empower those who hear them.
Thank you so much for sharing just a little bit about what your story was. It was so unique what you shared, but also I think resonated with so many storytellers who also shared their experiences. You also, as I mentioned, helped us collect over 100 stories, which is incredible. And so we'd love to hear, why did you decide to not only share your story, but also step up and help gather other stories?
I knew how important it was to hear from the people who have directly been affected by inequity in STEM, and I wanted to give my community the opportunity to share their experience. It was really awesome to see how many people actually cared and wanted to make a difference as much as I did. And we were able to learn practices to advocate for inclusion in STEM, and we also discovered actions which discourage students from STEM. So I'm really optimistic that we can help prepare a better future for students that allows equal opportunity to see how encompassing and fun STEM can actually be.
It's amazing. I know so many of you on this panel also help collect stories, and I imagine that what Caitlin is sharing about, why she decided to step up really resonates with each of you as well. Denise, I would love to kick it over to you. You also shared your story for the UnCommission. You helped to gather stories, and you had this unique role of also serving on the synthesis team. So first, we'd love to hear, why did you share your story with the UnCommission?
Well, truly, I felt that the UnCommission's mission was I had spent my first internship ever was actually at Tulsa Regional STEM Line, which was one of the anchoring organizations. So STEM had been a part of my life for so long. And then I went off to Xavier. If you know about Xavier, University of Louisiana, right, producing so many African-American doctors, that emphasis of STEM education was there. And just looking throughout the journey of the mission of my university and my life, idea of how I needed to understand the storyteller's experience, but also as I unpacked that, unpacked how important STEM educators were in my own journey, how important those mentorships were in guiding me and encouraging me and supporting me when I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I wasn't there. And I really, truly believe in the interconnectedness of the mission to my own core. And I realized that all over hearing stories, that was a shared experience. We're connected in so many different ways. And it was important that I knew that and I experienced that myself to make sure I honored all the stories that were coming through.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Denise. That resonates so deeply with me, how these stories showed that we are all connected in so many ways. I'd love to dig a little bit deeper into what your experience was like synthesizing so many stories. I think that you read and listened to literally hundreds of stories that came in.
Honestly, it was riveting. like seeing how many ways that we can experience similar things differently, right? And seeing how throughout the ages, throughout the years, throughout the regions, there was just this shared sense of wanting to be there, wanting to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged. And that feeling that when you're not, it's like, is this possible for me, right? One of the things that I kept noticing was this desire to contribute to STEM, this desire to speak out, this desire to do something, and then not having that encouragement where it takes somebody. And I think it was just so important because you recognize how important it is for us to show up for each other, for us to support each other, and for us to see each other, and knowing whether you're the first person to do something, you won't be the last person. And that was so, it was kind of comforting in its own way. Thinking about my own STEM journey and seeing that I wasn't alone in the times when I thought, I'm like, I don't understand this, and no one's here to show me. I didn't have that kind of support for a long time. When I got it, it really changed my life. It made me recognize what I can do, and that's a lot. So I was really grateful to see that in the stories and see that trend come up.
Thank you for that, Denise. I love hearing how the stories were validating for your own experience. I was just jotting down other things that you shared. This need to be seen, heard, and acknowledged was just so apparent throughout the stories that you read. How important it is to show up for each other. We also have a couple listener champions on this call, Melissa and Tamar. I imagine that as you've read stories, you've maybe heard similar themes as well. So, Priya, I would love to kick it over to you as someone who was an organizational partner, acting as an anchor for the unCommission. So, as an anchor, you helped us gather 32 stories, which is absolutely incredible. So, as a partner in this work and for the network, what did you learn through your experience in the unCommission?
Well, thank you. I learned a lot, and I think it wasn't just me, but it was our entire youth development team. I think that one of the things that I really acknowledged and leaned into was the process that you, like through the work of the unCommission, you created to centralize youth voice. You asked, the questions started with them. The answers came directly from their experiences and perspectives. And so at the New York Hall of Science, we work with high school and college students on the museum floor as explainers, and their role is to engage our audiences. And it was so powerful to be able to engage them, to take a moment to reflect on their own learning experiences, and then just tie that back into the kinds of learning experiences that they help shape and create for others at the museum. And so when you think about a power, like just that ability to connect your own experiences and to acknowledge that you're in a place to help shape that was a big learning moment for all of us, and something that we leaned into through this process.
That's amazing, Priya. I think it's so unique and really inspirational how you incorporated this process of the unCommission into the work that you were already doing. It sounds like both your storytellers and your staff were able to really participate in this unCommission to learn something, which is fantastic. I'd love to start talking about what emerged from the unCommission as well, this idea of belonging, which Denise, you already spoke so beautifully to. So Priya, staying with you for a second, what is your perspective on what has emerged from the unCommission?
Just looking at the stories, looking at the images, hearing the voices has been incredibly powerful and moving. I think, we captured it, and Caitlin and Denise really centralized it in their own stories, in when they talked about community and either turning to their communities for support or finding communities of support. And I think like one of the key aspects in creating environments where young people feel like they belong is the ability to foster communities that are inclusive, that have explicit invitations, and that invite them to bring their whole self. It's not the piece that we want, not the piece at the moment, but to really bring their experiences, their perspectives, and their questions to the conversation, because that's where the power is in terms of shaping the kinds of questions that we can continue to ask and develop.
It's beautiful, Priya. I love this. I wish I could have been in the room with all of you and your young storytellers sharing their stories. As you talked about, centering their perspectives was really what the intent of the unCommission was. And you all at NICE just delivered on that so beautifully, and we're so appreciative that you were able to lift up so many voices. I'd love to hear more perspectives on what has emerged. And so, Melissa, I'm going to kick it over to you. You have a really unique perspective in that you've been a teacher, you've worked in teacher recruitment and in the federal government. And so I'm wondering, what possibilities do you see this new direction opening up for our network and our network partners?
Yeah, such a great question. And thanks for it's just, I mean, just what an incredible day to be here. I mean, so many goals are set over the course of an administration, and to actually be here on a day and announce that the goal has been exceeded requires such deliberate, intentional focus on behalf of all of the partners. So it's just so exciting to be here and to think about what comes next. And my initial reactions are just, this feels so right, both from my own experiences and more importantly, from the experiences of the young storytellers, Isabella, Vanessa, Dayanara, Amanda, and Chuma, who I spent the most time with their stories as a listener through the unCommission. Belonging is such a central human need. We constantly are making those assessments in our lives. Do I belong here? Do I fit here? Are my ideas really welcome here? And this concept of focusing our individual and collective efforts on creating classrooms of belonging in STEM has the potential to truly change our country for the better. And I think inherently will make STEM more human, more alive. And I think that's so powerful. And we not only need to ask ourselves, like, what is STEM and how do kids learn it? And all the important questions that we've all been asking for the last, decade or more, but also what does it feel like? And this will inherently require us to change and do things differently, to think differently, act differently, measure differently. And in the stories that I witnessed, it really jumped out how much these individual moments matter, for better and worse. And I was struck by just how much time over the past, 2 decades now of, thinking about systems for STEM education. And we, think in sort of the big pictures and that's not wrong. It's not bad, but the stories brought me right back to how much these really individual moments matter. And I think what I'm most excited about what this means, is the opportunity to continue to talk to our young people about what is working and what is not, and make sure that we're making progress in a way that's meaningful for them. And also the opportunity to expand our partnerships and think more expansively, draw inspiration from other movements, individuals, and organizations who maybe haven't been connected previously to STEM education. And I'm so confident that already within the network, there are so many bright spots to draw inspiration from. I mean, the folks who are all on this call, some of the educators out there who I know create deliberate and precise and engineered moments to ensure that they see a student in their classroom's face light up, to know that they got it, that they feel successful, that they see themselves in the work, and that they feel a sense of belonging in the classroom. And there's so much more we have to learn from each other. A huge shout out to so many of the HBCUs, some of whom are on this call and are already 100K10 members who take such an intentional approach to belonging and inclusion. And we have a lot to learn. And maybe we'll even pull in more out of school time providers, community-based organizations, mentorship programs, and again, just a whole group of individuals and inspiration from lots of different places. So I'm excited about what's ahead, and I think it feels right. And I also the last thing I will say is that I was listening yesterday to a podcast of Brene Brown, and she was interviewing Dr. Maya Schenker, who served as a senior advisor in the Obama White House. And they were talking about courage in the face of change. And I'll leave you this one quote that really jumped out at me as I was thinking about this moment today. And Brene said that I think people don't think about the physics of systems, and that one small change reverberates in places you can never even anticipate. And so I think about how all of the individual stories and each of our individual actions reverberate through all of the systems of STEM education, kind of pun intended, and just what that could mean for our young people.
I love that, Melissa. That idea of the physics of systems is something to really sit with. I think something that's been really exciting for us at 100K10 is thinking about how belonging and inclusion, it's sort of this umbrella. There's so much that can fit under that, which means that there's space for all of us in this network to do the work. but there's also such responsibility.
Absolutely.
As well. I think I might have cut out for just a second, but I'd love to move on to Tamar to share your perspective as well on really as a teacher and someone who's engaged in the network so deeply for the past few years. So what are you most excited about in terms of what has emerged from this process?
Well, thank you first to 100K10 for having me on the panel today. I'm really honored to be among this group. And when I thought about this question, it was hard to identify one thing I'm excited about. There's so many, but one thing that definitely comes to mind is that I believe that one of the most valuable things each of us has is our voice. As a teacher, I've realized more and more how much my students' voices inform my own practice. As an early teacher, I was more focused on the content of my lessons and getting through everything I'd planned to do in a given class session. I learned early on that I needed to design my lessons in classrooms with flexibility, giving space for adjustments based on my students' needs and prior experiences, whether expressed verbally, visually, or in written form. In any case, I needed to listen to my students. And two of the most critical things that I find make an effective and productive classroom and work environment, frankly, is communication and collaboration. The 100K10 network artfully facilitates communication and collaboration across varied and diverse groups, students, educators, organizations, and other essential partners. One of the most valuable experiences I've had in 100K10 is working and learning from not only fellow classroom educators across grade levels, but people in organizations who are equally committed to providing students with rich, meaningful, and inclusive learning experiences. One of the best and most fascinating parts of being a teacher is connecting with students, hearing their stories about their journeys, both inside and outside of the classroom, and how their experience has impacted their lives, particularly as students in STEM. With the future direction of the network, I'm most excited about its powerful facilitation of communication and collaboration across these diverse groups. 100K10 provides a vast, welcoming, and supportive platform for members of these groups to give their voices, and then puts us in a collaborative place where we can take action and make positive changes.
That's beautiful, Tamar. Thank you for bringing your classroom alive for this panel and sharing that perspective. We are going to be moving into workshops pretty soon here for everyone attending Summit. But before we do that, I really want to open it up to the panel to comment on anything that maybe you haven't shared yet, things that you're excited about as it relates to these next steps for 100K10, or things that are on your mind about this process for the unCommission, or what you've heard from stories.
Sure, I'm happy to kick this portion off. One of the things that I think is incredibly important is this idea of mentorship. And we've talked about this as a panel in some of our previous conversations. And mentorship, definitely, we think about mentorship happening between educators and students. And I would have us expand the ways that we think about mentorship and thinking about peer-to-peer mentorship. And the idea of seeing others, like we just read that incredible story, seeing others in classes that look like you, that have experiences like you, and how powerful it is, and how do we activate these kind of peer-to-peer relationships and conversations to foster a better sense of belonging, to bring alive the kinds of communities that we're looking to build. Because I think these peer-to-peer relationships, they're building networks, they're building longevity in relationships that are going to help them succeed in the short term in their classes, but also in the long term as they explore STEM, the STEM workforce, and even STEM education as potential careers.
I like to add in following that beautiful address, because that reminds me about the importance of innovation in education, right? And one of the things that I noticed in stories that really moved me was the different ways that educators would have their students learn, and it would kind of take that competition out and endorse that notion of creating a peer-to-peer space and creating a space where you move forward as you uplift. And I think that would be just really changing how we envision STEM, because another major thing students felt competition, a lot of it was feeling, if I'm not doing this, I'm not there. But changing that to saying, how can I uplift the next person, was such a beautiful trend in innovation.
I think one important thing that I've learned over the most recent years is if I reveal some of my story, some students feel safe that they're sort of in a safe environment to share their own, whether it be with other students or with me personally. There are definitely times where I share some of the things that I experienced as a student, and I reveal that to students. And a lot of times, I rarely left a math classroom, particularly in high school and beyond, feeling like, yep, I've got it all. I don't need to study any further. And I emphasize that most of my learning in mathematics was done outside of the classroom, the efforts that I needed to put into the work. And students often are surprised by that. I'm a math teacher, so they think naturally she would have left class with having known everything. And when I reveal that, typically that draws student stories out. So I think relating, again, like I said, connecting with students, being vulnerable in front of them, showing that we are human ourselves, I think creates a safer environment, in my experience, for both teachers and students, to Talia's in the chat.
Tamar, on like the opposite side of that, like I really appreciate whenever my professors do share that, because like it's just it can be so overwhelming sometimes. And I'm like, how did y'all do this? Like, were y'all able to actually like how did you do it? And they're like, well, it was hard, but, and then they can give me the skills that they learned. And I really appreciate when I'm able to have that connection with them. And I try and share my experience because I'm a TA, so I'll teach like undergraduate organic chemistry labs, and they think that I know everything, and I'm like, I really don't. And I did struggle with organic chemistry in the beginning. I'm getting a chemistry degree, like a chemistry PhD, and I never knew that I would do that. But it's because of the mentorship and the pushing of my professors and my teachers that said, like, you can do this, like you should do this. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I totally agree. The vulnerability, the stories, and we tend to I don't know, gloss over like, oh yeah, and then I got a degree in this and it just like happened, and actually starting to unpack some of the challenges along the way and some of the failures that we've all experienced and what it looked like in response to that, I think will be so critical and really, again, an exciting moment to make this more human. The other thing that jumped out at me too was that in some of the stories that I read, I mean, just how important some of the developmental milestones really were. Like a lot of the stories that I witnessed, many of the students were talking about how in middle school or kind of early high school, there was a really formative experience that either cemented their belief that they were great at math or great at science, or on the flip side, reinforced a really harmful narrative that maybe they had experienced that math or science wasn't for them, whether that was because of something, again, very explicit or implicit in the way that adults, for the most part, had talked to them about their experiences. And it just made me think about how important some of those earlier kind of milestones are to cement those pieces of a kind of STEM identity, if you will, that then, you can, it helps to build like the resilience or in some cases that opportunity is not available. So I think there's so much opportunity for us to learn more. And one of the things I love most about the unCommission, we have a group of students who will tell us the truth about whether what we're doing is working or not. And I think that's really incredible. Like, kids know if their teachers care about them. Kids know if they're getting the kinds of experiences they're looking for. Kids know if they feel like they belong in a place or not. And so I think this encourages us to be more vulnerable ourselves and also to continue to ask the question. And it was a great sort of kickoff to an ongoing dialogue.
Plus 100 to everything you just said, Melissa. I think, when we're recruiting when we're at the Hall of Science, these students self-select into this program. So when you think about who even applies, it's students that that usually have good relationships with STEM, see it as a place for them. And what we're trying to break down is, is change the way that they think about STEM, and not just as knowledge, not just as information, but really as a process by which you explore and question the world around you. And I think when we're even in application, we try to downplay the STEM content, and we really talk about some of the things that Tamar did, which are the communication and the collaboration, and thinking about the skills you develop through these experiences. And we try to really lean into the opportunity to shift the ways that some of our participants feel invited into the space. But it's a challenge for us, because we're hiring at 14, 15, and by that time they've already made that choice and made that decision. So how are we either breaking that down or creating a broader invitation by which they can continue to explore these subjects in a new way?
Totally, Priya. It's like, we have long said that STEM is for everyone. Like, now we actually have to make it so. And that's a pretty incredible charge.
I so appreciate you, Priya, talking about your experience trying to create that sense of belonging within the work that you do. Melissa talking about what this might look like for the network more broadly. Caitlin talking about your personal experience and when you have felt that sense of belonging with your own students and also with your professors. Denise, I'd love to bring you into this as well. Has there been a time that you're thinking about where you really felt that sense of belonging from your own teachers when you were in school?
Oh, Malianta, I would say that the most memorable time, it kind of reminds me of Caitlin's story. I had a professor pull up his transcript in chemistry, and at that moment, because I was like, chemistry and me are not the best of buddies. And he pulled up his transcript, and in that moment, he showed us how he struggled, he had even failed. He even failed, and he was teaching us organ. I'm like, hey, I'm my kind of guy. And so that was really nice. And it always sat with me 4 or 5 years later, because even though I ended up not moving forward in chemistry in that way, I still always went to his office for mentorship. He gave me textbooks. He gave me just books to read, books within the sciences, books within the health sciences, which is where I transcended into and where I moved myself into, because I was scared about the spot. So I felt very safe there, and I felt very my space within the sciences, within STEM. That wasn't where I wanted to be initially, but it was because I didn't know I could be there. So he helped me to discover where I am today, and I'm very happy here. I'm looking at health science, but I never knew that was an option until he came into I came to the office, and he was like, I got this book for you, a whole entire textbook. Right, I did.
Thanks for sharing that experience, Denise. Before we close out, I just want to bring it back to what Priya shared. Really, the unCommission was all about centering young people's voices and our storytellers. And so I'd love to hear from all of you. Is there any storyteller or story that you heard throughout this process that you're really going to be holding with you for this next hour or so as we engage in our workshops?
For me, I don't think it's one story, but it's really the theme. It's the theme of where people didn't feel included, and specifically where they felt intentionally excluded. And so I think that's something I want to take with me into these conversations, is just some of that intentionality or how they internalize that, whether or not it was an intentional move on an educator's part or in an environment, but that our actions, our words have impact and can have lasting impact in such a powerful way, is something that I'm going to take with me into the next portion.
I think in addition to having to hearing the stories today, and Bradley, Dayanara's story for me was one of the young people who I had the opportunity to spend a little bit more time with her story, and I will certainly take that with me. I also think it's very valuable to make sure that we keep coming back to the stories. So print one out, print many out, set a reminder in your calendar to go back and read them. If you are in a position where you're engaging with students every day, amazing, you're getting that live. If you're in a position where you're a few layers removed from the direct work, it can be an incredible way to make sure that we're, centering ourselves in the stories of young people every day as we start our days.
I love that, Melissa. Tamar, did you want to jump in?
Sure. Yes. I was thinking also about a story that kind of stood out to me, but I'm like Priya. I can't identify. It's not just one. It makes me think about how grateful I am to be in a position where I get to hear stories. I have direct access to my students, and I get to hear stories a lot, and I get to know the students around those stories as well. And at the beginning of each term, I often give a survey to my students to ask about their math experience, their journey up to that point. And I never obligate them to share anything more than they're comfortable with. They could share nothing, but it is fascinating to see how open and eager students are to share how they got to where they are, and how much it reveals to me that we cannot make assumptions about our students. We have to hear from them before we can make plans, and how important that is. How much it informs, like I said in my piece, informs my practice. It's so important to listen to them, and again to share my own journey and find similarities or differences and have that sort of out on the table. I'm just grateful to be in this position.
Thank you so much, Tamar. That was a beautiful way actually to close out this panel, what you just shared. We have to hear from them before we make plans. I know you were talking about your classroom, but I think that's a lesson for all of us as we think about our own networks next steps. So thank you for that reminder. This has been an amazing, amazing panel. And just want to repeat back some of what I heard from each of you that's really sticking with me. Caitlin, you talked about how important it is for us to be fostering both passion and purpose for young people in STEM. Denise, you talked about that theme of wanting to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And that's certainly sticking with me as we go into these workshops. Priya, you talked about that importance of continuing to center young people's voices and really fostering communities. Melissa, I love your charge to all of us to really think about the physics of systems and how we can inherently make STEM more alive. And Tamar, you sharing that we need to listen to our students. We cannot do the work without that, and really encouraging us, reminding us that it's going to be so important to not only listen to our storytellers right now, but really throughout the next decade of our work. So thank you, all of you, for being a part of this panel and the uncommissioned process. I am so humbled and honored to have joined you in this conversation. So everybody else at Summit, I invite you to please join me in thanking our amazing panelists for their contributions and insights during this panel. You all probably can't see this, but applause is happening right now in the chat.